Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We're excited to present on this topic. We're going to be talking about how to maximize patent portfolio value in 2026. One of the things that we've seen is the 80-20 framework, where you have 20% of the patent portfolio driving 80% of the value. So we want to talk about that, talk about how to manage this smarter, and then talk a little bit about how AI impacts this as well. My name is John Gross. I'm VP of Sales here at Lumensi. I'm joined by Vamsi Krishna, who is our Senior Vice President and Head of Global Delivery and AI Product. Quickly, I've got 18 years of experience in this space, both in legal technology, legal operations, and IP consulting. And I'm very excited to be here with my colleague Vamsi, Vamsi, you want to give a quick background?
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. I've been in the IP space for close to 17 years now, and have an electrical engineering background, and have been part of a lot of litigation campaigns and monetization campaigns, where clients derived $1 billion+ verdicts, as well as a lot of value out of patent assets.
Perfect. Well, great. Well, real quickly before we get started, it would be remiss of me if I didn't give a quick overview of who Lumensi is. We are a full-service IP consulting firm with a global presence and deep technical expertise. We work with a number of the Fortune 500 and AmLaw 200 companies, really for the full IP consulting spectrum, from pre-licensing all the way through litigation support, expert witness, claim charts, reverse engineering, source code review. We operate amongst a number of different sectors. We have a specialty in semiconductor, wireless, and telecom. We've got a significant amount of experience with verdicts and settlements. You can see there 3.5 billion plus in verdict settlements and cost savings, 200 plus clients, 100,000 plus patents analyzed, and a team of truly deep technical experts globally. So focus in on the US as well as global operations in India, and expanding rapidly into new geographies. Quick housekeeping, you are going to be muted. We just want to make sure that we have the ability to keep noise down. If you do have questions, comments, or anything that requires technical support, please feel free to use the chat. We'll take questions at the end. We'll go through whatever's in the chat. Feel free to submit those questions as we walk through this. And we will make the recording available to attendees here, as well as posting on our website. So I guess, Vamsi, before we jump in, talk to us about the core problems you see IP teams struggling with today, and maybe a little bit of why you wanted to build a session around this.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the core problem we see is that most IP teams are managing portfolios that have grown much faster than their operating model. The number of invention disclosures has increased. Portfolios are more global now. Technology cycles are moving very fast. And at the same time, teams are being asked to make more decisions around renewals, pruning, licensing, enforcement, and budget justification, often with the same headcount and the same review capacity. So the issue is not that IP teams lack expertise. They usually know what good analysis looks like. The challenge is that they do not always have a scalable way to decide where that expert analysis should be focused first. So that is why we wanted to build the session around the 80-20 idea. In most portfolios, value is not distributed evenly. A smaller set of patents usually drives the majority of licensing, enforcement, and defensive or strategic value. But many organizations still manage the portfolio as if every patent deserves the same level of attention. This cannot be the case. The real question becomes, how do you separate the patents that matter from the noise, and how do you do that in a way that is structured, repeatable, and defensible? So that's the practical problem this session is trying to address.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. So we're going to cover why value is concentrated in that small subset of patents like Vamsi was talking about. talk about where and why prioritization breaks down in current workflows, and then give you some practical advice on how to structure an 80/20 framework where you can identify high impact assets and really reduce that noise. We'll emphasize clarity, defensibility, and helping you make better portfolio decisions with more confidence. So let's start here. Why today? Why in 2026 does this matter more, maybe than ever? I know that we talk a little bit about here with tariffs, supply chain issues. You talked a little about growing portfolios requiring more oversight, and then leadership drilling down more into portfolio value and asking more questions. So talk to me maybe about where you see the most pressure and then how it shows up in everyday kind of portfolio management.
Yeah, so the urgency is actually coming from a combination of budget pressures and business uncertainty. Leadership teams are looking more closely at every major cost center, and IP is no exception. Patent portfolios are expensive to build and expensive to maintain. When budgets are tight, the question becomes much sharper. What are we actually getting from this portfolio? At the same time, product markets are, less predictable. Tariffs, supply chain shifts, changing, manufacturing footprints, and fast-moving competitive dynamics all make it harder to assume that yesterday's portfolio strategy still maps to tomorrow's business reality. That it's not true anymore. So leadership is asking IP teams different questions than they may have asked 5 or 10 years ago, or even last year. It is no longer just do we have enough patents? It's just not that. It is now which patents matter, which patents support the business, which patents create leverage, which patents should we stop paying for, and where we should really invest more deeply. That's a big shift from a build and hold mindset, which was predominantly there for some time. So we need that mindset shift to a quality over quantity mindset. The pressure is not simply to cut costs. It is to make the portfolio more intentional. And companies want to retain the assets that support strategy, monetization, and defensibility, and do that to reduce spend on assets that no longer create meaningful value. So that is why early stage clarity has become so important.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. I know every moment in time feels unique, but this definitely does feel like a unique time when you've got all the kind of geopolitical issues as well as these growing and larger patent portfolios. So yeah, no, that makes total sense. So one of the things that we've seen in research is where you have the top 10 to 20% of patents are generating the overwhelming majority of the portfolio value, maybe 80 to 90%. But like you mentioned, we're seeing the portfolios managed as if every patent matters equally, and that's certainly not the case. The question then becomes, in your experience, how are IP teams identifying or finding which patents actually make that 20%?
Yeah, and most cases, teams have a strong intuition, but not always an evidence-backed answer. So that is an important distinction. Many IP teams can point to the patents they believe are important. They may know which patents are tied to major products, which ones come from key inventors, which ones are in active technology areas, or which ones are being discussed in licensing or litigation contexts. But when you ask, can we rank the portfolio by value? Can we explain why these 200 patents matter more than those 2000? Can we defend that decision to leadership or a business unit? That's where the gap appears. So the top 20% is often partially known but not fully validated. And there are also hidden assets, sometimes older patents or patents outside the most visible product line, have strong claims or market relevance that no one has revisited in years. So on the other side, some patents that are emotionally or historically important may not have the market relevance or enforceability people assume. So, I would say IP teams often know parts of the 20%, but they do not always have a structured process to identify it consistently across the entire portfolio. That's where the framework helps. It turns intuition into a more defensible portfolio view.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So here you also describe a bandwidth and structure problem with more disclosures, global filings, and we've talked about larger portfolios, which inevitably leads to less time for decision. So, how does that structure affect day-to-day management of the portfolios and day-to-day decisions? And maybe where are you seeing the most problems?
Yeah, I mean, this really shows up in very practical ways. First, invention disclosure triage becomes, faster, but not necessarily better. Teams have to decide quickly which ideas deserve filing, but they may not have enough time to connect each disclosure to market direction, or competitor activity or product strategy. Second, renewal decisions become reactive. A maintenance deadline comes up and the team has to make a call based on limited information. Keep it, abandon it, or escalate it. If there is no scoring system or portfolio segmentation already in place, that decision becomes harder than it should be. So third, licensing and enforcement candidates can be selected based on familiarity than rather than evidence. The team may focus on patterns that are already known internally rather than systematically identifying the strongest assets. And then, fourth, prior art and claim strength questions, may come too late. A patent may look attractive commercially, but after deeper review, the team discovers, validity or coverage issues that should have been, flagged earlier. So the day-to-day impact is slower decisions, inconsistent decisions, and sometimes overinvestment in assets that are not the strongest candidates. So the team is not failing; the process is overloaded right now.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about consistency, it is important to have a process in place that's repeatable and scalable, because without a consistent way to prioritize, you are spending way too much time and effort in non-effective results. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we talk a little bit about the this portfolio value gap. You've got volume that is scaling, but value isn't scaling with it. You've got a a small subset of the portfolio is driving the value. So where do you see the this gap showing up, and how do teams address that?
Yeah, actually, this gap is crucial because this gap can, cost an organization in several ways. So the most obvious cost is direct maintenance spend. If a company is, maintaining a large number of low impact patents, those costs accumulate year after year. Individually, one patent may not seem like major expense, but across hundreds or thousands of patents and multiple jurisdictions, it becomes, material. The second cost is opportunity cost. Every hour spent reviewing or maintaining low value assets is an hour not spent on the patents that could support licensing, enforcement, product protection, standard strategy, or competitive positioning. These are very valuable areas. And then the third cost, is missed monetization. And if high value patents are buried inside a large patent portfolio, the company may never build the evidence needed to license or enforce them. The value may exist, but it is not activated. So the fourth cost is risk. If decisions are made without understanding claim strength, market relevance, or product exposure, the organization may invest in weak assets or prune assets that actually had strategic importance. So the portfolio value gap is not just a cost issue; it is a decision quality issue. A value of really, if you're approaching it with volume-driven approach, how many patents do we have? That's the volume-driven approach. Like a value-driven approach asks which patents really create leverage, and what should we do with them? So the second question is what improves your ROI and plugs that gap.
Yeah, so the focus is on identifying the valuable patents in order to make sure that you're focusing your time right. So here we talk about how to identify or define a valuable patent. You have four dimensions here. You talk about market relevance, claim strength, prior art landscape, and real world applications. Um, where do you see where the one of these where these dimensions are most commonly underweighted when teams are evaluating their portfolios? Is it claim strength? Is it prior art landscape? Where do you see?
Yeah, absolutely. The four dimensions are really useful, and because they remind us that value is not just one dimensional. The first dimension is market relevance. Is the patent connected to an active market and adapted? Is it adopted technology or a commercially meaningful product area? A patent can be technically elegant, but if the market has moved away from the technology, the value may be limited. The second is claim strength. Are the claims broad enough, clear enough, and enforceable enough to support a real business objective? This is where legal and technical analysis become critical. The third is prior art landscape. How crowded is the field? Are there references that create invalidation risk? Does the patent hold up when tested against earlier work? The fourth is, real world application. Is there evidence that the invention is actually being, used in products, or is it used in standards, systems, or implementations? So this is especially important for licensing and enforcement because value depends on the ability to connect claims to real world activity. So the dimension I see most commonly underweighted is real world application, closely followed by prior art. Teams may kind of evaluate a patent based on internal importance or technical merit, but the market may not have adopted that approach. Or the market, may have adopted it, but the claims may not map cleanly to actual products. Alternatively, the patent may look strong until prior art analysis exposes a weakness. So the strongest assets are the ones where all four dimensions come together, like relevant market, strong claims, manageable prior art risk, and evidence of real world use.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, the goal is not to analyze every pen, as we say here, but to make sure that you make faster and defensible decisions on the right pens. So that kind of leads us
Absolutely.
into the next question, which is why prioritization breaks down. Where are teams spending their time? You may be on the wrong pens. So some of the challenges we list here are fragmented inputs, manual constraints, late prior art, I think, which is one we'll talk about a little bit more. But which one of these, or maybe which several one of these, do you find to be most damaging, and maybe why?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something, uh, you know, actual practical practitioners know, who have gone through this many cycles, right? And they all matter actually. But if I have to pick one, I would say the absence of uniform scoring is the most damaging. Fragmented data is a problem, but teams can still work through fragmentation if they have a clear decision framework. Manual constraints are a problem, but you can manage them if you know where to focus. Recency bias is one of the big ones, but a structured review can correct for it. But without uniform scoring, every decision becomes harder to compare. One reviewer may emphasize clean breadth, another may emphasize product relevance. A business unit may care about defensive value. A licensing team may care about evidence of use. All of these perspectives are valid, but if they are not captured in a consistent framework, the portfolio becomes difficult to prioritize. So that creates inconsistent decisions. Two similar patents may be treated differently. A patent may be maintained because someone remembers it as important, while another asset with stronger market relevance is overlooked. So late prior art is also very damaging because it can invalidate assumptions after the team has already invested time and money. But even there, the solution is to make prior art part of the scoring process earlier. So I would say uniform scoring is the foundation. It gives the team, a shared language for value.
Yeah, and once again, to that point, without structure, there is a lack of consistency, a lack of insightful decision-making process. So up until this point, we've kind of defined the problem, where things are being missed. So let's talk a little bit maybe about the solution. We talk about this 80/20 framework, and you've got 4 different segments, which you mentioned here, which is filter, segment, evaluate, and act. Can you walk us through each step, and then maybe identify where teams are missing or fall short in the sequence?
Absolutely. So the framework is designed to align effort with impact. The first step is filter. This is where we reduce noise early. We identify patterns that are clearly outside current business priorities, disconnected from active markets, expired or near expired with limited relevance, or otherwise unlikely to justify deeper analysis. So, that layer goes out. Now, the second step is segment. This is where we group patterns into practical categories: high value candidates, strategic hold assets, and prune candidates. The goal is not to create a perfect final answer immediately. The goal is to organize the portfolio so that the next level of review is focused. Now, the third step is, evaluate. This is where deeper analysis happens, but only for the assets that justify it. That may include claim mapping, prior art, validation, evidence of use research, product linkage, standards mapping, or market analysis. And the final and the fourth step is act on it. Now, that's the most important step because the analysis only creates value if it leads to action. So that action may be advancing a patent for licensing, retaining it for defensive reasons, pruning it, selling it, or flagging it for further review. So where most teams fall short is between segment and they may collect information, but they do not always convert that information into clear decisions. Or they evaluate too many patents at the same depth, which slows everything down. So the framework helps by saying, do not analyze every patent equally. Use filtering and segmentation to decide where deeper analysis is really worth it.
Yeah, and to that point, so not every patent deserves equal analysis. We've talked about that on several of these slides. So can we dive a little bit deeper into the number 2, which is how do you identify which patents are high value, low value, or medium value?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are, a high value asset usually has a combination of strong external relevance and strong legal or technical positioning. So the signals might include active market adoption, evidence of use, competitor relevance, strong claim coverage, manageable prior art risk, and alignment with licensing or enforcement objectives. So these are the patents where deeper investment may be justified. A strategic hold is different. It may not be an immediate licensing candidate, but it still supports the business. For example, if you think about it, for example, it may protect a core product area, block competitors, support freedom to operate positioning, strengthen a standard strategy, or preserve optionality in an emerging technology space. We also have, a prune candidate. A prune candidate usually has weak signals across multiple dimensions. It may be disconnected from current or future products, have limited market relevance, sit in a crowded product landscape, and have narrow claims, or lack evidence of real world use. It may also be expensive to maintain relative to its strategic value. So, prune candidates are always gone. The key is that no single signal should decide the bucket by itself. For example, a patent with narrow claims may still be worth keeping if it maps directly to a critical competitor product. A patent with limited current revenue relevance may still be a strategic hold if it protects a future roadmap area. So segmentation is about looking at the combined signal, market, claims, prior art, business relevance, and also the cost. Yeah. So not a single signal. It's a combined signal that matters.
Are you finding that teams are having pruning reluctance? Maybe that there is a fear of pruning a valuable patent, or having to answer that decision to their C-suite. What have you seen in that space?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what it's a lot strategic, and different companies have their own internal decision making towards prune candidates. So there is no single framework there. But traditionally, prune candidates usually have weak signals and across the dimensions. So it may be disconnected from future products. They don't probably might not have market relevance, and it's very expensive just to maintain them relative to its strategic signal. So the key is just to not have it and prune it ahead of time, rather than waiting and paying a lot for the prune candidates.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that kind of feeds into this whole 80/20 framework that we've been talking about. So can we talk about the role of prior art in prioritization? Um, Maybe a little bit around what does it look like operationally, and then maybe what typically goes wrong when it comes into the process too late.
Absolutely. This is a crucial step in the overall process. Operationally, it means prior art should not be treated as something that only happens after a patent has already been selected for major investment. So instead, prior art signals should be part of the early prioritization process. That does not mean doing a full invalidity search on every patent in the portfolio. It's just expensive, effort draining and whatnot. That would not be practical, but it does mean using early prior art screening to identify crowded technology areas, obvious variety concerns, nearby references, and claim elements that may be difficult to define. The purpose is to separate patterns that look promising from patterns that are actually defensible. So when prior art comes in too late, several things can go wrong. A team may spend money building claim charts or licensing narratives around a patent that later turns out to have serious validity concerns, or they may have advanced it's possible that they may advance an enforcement strategy before understanding the prior art risk, or they may overvalue patterns during pruning or sale discussions because they have not tested the strength of the claims. So bringing prior art earlier shifts risk detection forward. It helps the team avoid false positives, patterns that look valuable but may not hold up, and it gives more confidence around the patterns that should move forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. So up until this point, we've been talking about the challenges. We've been talking about the solution. But let's talk a little bit about when this is done right. What does this look like? Where do you see results first? Is it maybe cost reduction, faster decision making, or what? I mean, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, the first